You are listening to the Intelligent Racer Podcast, where we look to educate and entertain the endurance racing community through discussions with racing professionals and elite age groupers.
In today's episode, I speak with Richard Kresser. He recently completed the GODZone adventure race in New Zealand. He also is an ultra runner who has won the Bigfoot 200. We talk about those adventures and more. I hope you enjoy. Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, glad to be here, Adam.
So why don't we start off with walking me through your background and how you got into endurance sports?
Yeah, I started marathoning when I was in college. You know, the pretty typical thing, living in the Midwest. There's not really too much, active mountain sports around the Midwest. So I started getting into marathoning in college. But right after college in 2009, I moved out to Washington State and, kind of discovered trail running and ultra running and really fell down that rabbit hole. I was a climber at the time. And so I was pretty happy to end up in Washington State with, some of the best volcanoes and, climbing around. But you can't climb every weekend, of course, just weather and everything else combined. So trail running was a really easy cross-training sport to do on weekends when you can't climb, and really, started just getting into your first 50K. And, of course, very typical, read the book Born to Run and ultramarathon man, and really got like, wow, yeah, 100 milers, I'm going to give one of those a try, and then, do one, and then I'll be done with it forever. And, very typically that doesn't happen. And just ended up really getting into them. And, just the more you do them, the more you really want to try and test and see how far you can go with them.
Very cool. So we're actually talking today. I'm in New York City. You're in New Zealand. So, so what took you over to New Zealand? What was the trip about, and what have you been doing over there?
Growing up in the Midwest, it can be a little bit of a sheltered existence there. Very good people, very good place to grow up, but you don't really see like that much of a wider worldview. And, I haven't really done that much international travel. I spent a year in Afghanistan in the Kandahar province while I was in the military. But besides that, I've never lived in a foreign country. So I kind of just wanted the experience of not just traveling abroad, but actually living abroad. So, kind of just set a date and, and was just, decided, all right, I'm going to go live in New Zealand. It was a pretty easy choice. I wanted a place with really good mountains to climb, as well as, speaking English. And, New Zealand was, kind of top of that short list. So.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, it's an outdoor paradise from what I understand. I haven't been there myself, but it's pretty amazing. So how long have you been over there?
My girlfriend, Maddie, and me came over here in November, and we actually only have about another 3 weeks left here. So just 6 months living here, and then so we hit the summer months over here, and then we'll be back to Seattle to hit the summer in the Northwest.
Awesome. So one of the things I noticed was you recently did an adventure race, adventure race in New Zealand. So can you talk about that a little bit? How did you get involved in that, and what was the team that you participated with?
Yeah, I did my first expedition level adventure race. It was Primal Quest in Lake Tahoe in 2015. And before that, I hadn't, really known much about adventure racing. Like I knew it was out there, but I didn't really know any teammates and, just didn't have that, kind of level of skill. But I got brought onto a team for PQ Tahoe. And it was just an incredible experience. I mean, I never had really known anything like that, to be out there racing, for, I think it took us 9.5 days on that one. So it was just a really incredible experience. And, then when I decided to move to New Zealand, of course, the winners of PQ Lake Tahoe was the Warren Bates. He's the CEO and race director for GODZone. So, of course, I knew about GODZone and really started looking into it. And I was like, oh, wow, it's right around the time that I'm going to be in New Zealand. And also it's, in Queenstown, which is a stone's throw from Wanaka, where I was going to be living. So, just kind of started thinking about maybe trying to put a team together of people that I knew from the Pacific Northwest. And thankfully found enough people to, who were really interested in joining up with us. It started off with just talking to Gavin Woody about it. He's a good buddy of mine, another mountain climber, and he won Bigfoot 200 the year before I won it. So, we match up pretty well on speed and such. And then kind of just found a couple other adventure racer specific people, Dusty and Emily Casaria from Bellingham. And since Gavin and me don't have quite as much AR experience as they do, they really brought that to the table. And very well matched up team. So it was cool to put a team together. Hadn't raced together with them before, but we had a pretty good experience out there.
Yeah, so walk me through the race a little bit. I mean, what did you find most challenging? What were some of the interesting legs that you encountered, and what kind of surprised you about the race?
After having done Primal Quest, I kind of thought that I knew what a 7-day race would give you, but I just did not expect the technicality of the course. It was, Primal Quest was just like long treks and hikes and stuff, but this was those same long treks, but on just absolutely gnarly terrain. I mean, in the middle of the night, you had a 3-hour gorgeering where you were just wading through a river, having to navigate little 5-meter waterfalls in the middle of the night. Just really, really intense terrain. And during the day, you're just on very steep mountain climbing, and they did not hold your hand for any of the race. They really, just put you out on terrain, and you chose, as gnarly of terrain as you wanted to go up, which was often, the most efficient way to get where you wanted to go. But it wasn't just, nice, long, easy treks. It was up some steep mountain climbing. None of it purely technical where you needed to be roped up or few. But I mean, there was one time we had our whitewater throw bags, and we set up a fixed line for them just because the vegetation slope was so steep that we just felt better having a hand line up it. So it was I think that's what took all 4 of us by surprise, was how just gnarly the terrain is over here in New Zealand, and how much Warren and his entire team put us through the ringer for hard terrain.
Yeah, I've seen pictures and videos from the race, and it just looks like an incredible course, and just obviously really challenging. So it's pretty cool that you were able to do that. And then, I mean, obviously you said you formed the team kind of on the spot, or you kind of, brought it together. Were there any kind of team dynamic issues? Obviously, after being sleep deprived for a few days, some of your, usually a person's worst personality traits kind of come out. Were you able to all kind of get together, even though you didn't have that kind of long history?
Yeah, that was what I was most afraid of, was the interpersonal conflicts for the 4 of us. Gavin, Emily, and Dusty had been training together back in Washington, but since it was only very soon, right after we formed the team, I came over here to New Zealand. I was kind of the man apart, and I was just kind of really concerned about that. I felt like, I had a good relationship with them all, but, still, you never know what's going to happen when you haven't raced, and you're on day 5 of it. But it was, I totally caught me by surprise that we didn't have a single, real big conflict at all or anything. I think the worst that happened, Dusty was the main navigator, and I was, kind of his backup. And there was a couple times where just, we disagreed on a route a little bit, and it was just like, well, I think we should go this way. And he was like, well, I think we should go this way. And we kind of just be like, okay, well, you're the main navigator, so it's up to you. And we went that way. And, whether one way was more efficient or not, but that was it. We kind of just left it on the table and be like, and, no blow ups, no nothing. I was just really impressed by how well everyone, worked, within the team, and no real issues at all.
So did you do any specific training for the race in the lead up to it, or did you just kind of go in knowing that you had the endurance base and background, and obviously you have experience in the mountains and things, but did you have to do anything around the kayaking, all that kind of stuff? Did you have a background in that?
Yeah. About a decade ago, when I was in college, I did a lot more kayaking than I do now. So, I had a little bit of experience, but my main 2 pursuits right now are trail running and climbing. So, I knew that I didn't really have to put too much effort into the trekking sections, but the mountain biking and the water is what I was very, very much concerned about. So being over here for 4 months leading up to GODZone, I was able to kind of get out on the terrain, scout out quite a bit of the area down near Queenstown where it might be, and really just focused a lot on the biking section. I mean, most adventure races are bike heavy, so I knew that that would be a pretty intense part of it. And GODZone specifically, much more than races I've found in the States, like, is a water heavy course, both on just like flat paddling as well as the white water. And that was what I was most concerned about. Like traveling out of Maudie and me were living out of a tiny van. It was as much of a hassle just having, traveling with my mountain bike on the back of it, but there's no way I could travel with, a kayak too. And there's no places that do full day rentals around here. So it was really stressing me out that I was not able to get much paddle time, in there. But, I had a buddy lent me a wingtip paddle, so I was able to at least have that. And I then ended up finding a buddy, Mal Law, who had a sit-on-top kayak. So I'm out in the middle of the lake, just kayaking this bus around with a wingtip paddle. But yeah, it was good strength training, and I finally, right before the race, got some good paddle sessions in. So kind of eased my concern a little bit. Yeah,
cool. And then in terms of nutrition, were you able to kind of apply some of your longer ultra running nutrition strategies for this race? I mean, was there anything you did differently?
Yeah, that was a real kind of hard thing of like trying to figure out how you do your food. I mean, you pack all of your food on what you think you're going to need before it. Like the TAs offer no assistance in terms of nutrition, but really kind of modeled it around not just like a trail run, not, maybe like a 50 miler, because 50 milers they're still pretty short. You're kind of mainly concentrating on goos and gels and kind of, the space food type of stuff, but something of this length, I kind of had a sum of that, maybe around 15%, quote unquote space food, but the rest of it was more backpacker food of just real lightweight, dehydrated stuff, jerkies and salami and, nuts, cookies and stuff, real kind of high fat type of stuff, but more what maybe a backpacker would take with them than a trail runner. And so it was just, your pace is a lot slower. Like, I mean, even on the trekking sections, you're not really running that much. Like on most of it, you're more concerned about just trying to effectively navigate the terrain, but you're not pushing your body at like the same heart rate as you would be during, a 50 mile or 100 mile trail run. So you don't kind of need, just like suck down a gel in 7 seconds and then be done with it. You can kind of, have a little bit more time to eat some real foods, which I think is pretty important for a race of that length, to not just solely concentrate on gels and, energy bars and that type of stuff.
Right. And I guess since your heart rate is kept relatively low, the stress to your GI tract is probably relatively low in the grand scheme of things, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. That was the entire mentality behind it, that like, you never were stressing your body to the point. I mean, since just due to the length of it, your pace is so much slower, to sustain it for that long, that your GI tract is never really being, like taxed to that level. So I really think, going for more real foods was the key. Gavin did a little bit more, kind of space food than I did, which, it worked for him. So, once again, it is as much of a personal thing as you can. And so mine was a tad bit more heavy, just because my, calorie to weight was a little bit lower. So my pack, I think, was a tad bit heavier than his, just due to the food that I brought. But at the same time, like when you're out there for that long, a couple extra pounds to have something that your GI tract is going to be able to take a little bit better, I think is worth it for me, at least.
Cool. Well, it sounds like a pretty amazing adventure and really challenging race. So switching gears, you mentioned the Bigfoot 200. So in 2016, you did both the Tahoe and Bigfoot 200. So kind of what was the motivation to take on that 200 mile distance running race?
Yeah, I first, heard of the 200 miler when Candace Burt put out about Tahoe 200. in 2013. But then looking at the price tag of of close to $1,000, and I had just left the Army at that time and was living out of my van, traveling around the Western United States, and so as a dirtbag trail runner climber, it was kind of out of my budget to do something like that. But lo and behold, I actually ended up working for Candace on part of her 200-mile crew, putting on Tahoe 200 and then Bigfoot 200 the first year that it was around in 2015. But then, for kind of, all right, eyeballing out what I was going to do in 2016, like after having put on or helped her put on two Tahoe 200s and one Bigfoot 200, I finally was like, all right, like Candace, I really want to take a step back from helping, as your volunteer coordinator and try and run Bigfoot myself, after eyeballing this distance out for so long. And so that was kind of like my big goal for the year. My A goal was Bigfoot 200. I guess kind of two A goals. I had my rash project around the volcanoes too, but that was, kind of the big one. And I did another 200 miler in May in Washington State too, just a small little one that goes around a chain link fence for 21 loops. And so that was kind of my first 200 miler that year in preparation for Bigfoot 200. And yeah, just had a much better race than I expected to it. Bigfoot ended up just around 62 hours, I think. And yeah, I mean, the entire time I thought someone was like right on my tail. So I was trying to like move as efficiently as possible. But I mean, that race is such an incredible race for the scenery. You're out in the middle of nowhere. It really is Bigfoot country. I mean, you start off by running around one volcano, run over to the next volcano, Adams, and then run up north to Mount Rainier. And so it's just a really cool race. And it was really cool to get to experience it, from being, helping out on the inaugural one to then coming back and being able to do pretty well at it the second year of it.
What is the name of the first 200, that smaller one with the chain link fence? I've never heard of it, so I'm just curious.
It is a Washington classic. It's called Pigtails 200, and Van Fawn puts it on. There's it's around Lake Youngs, and it's really, it's you don't do it for the course, but it's such a cool community event in Washington, where since it's 21 loops. Everyone in the Washington trail running scene comes out, and maybe they'll hang out, maybe they'll do a lap with you. People will just hang around, and it's just like it's the big community event around there. So my friends and family were all able to come out and like pace me. I mean, I don't think of the 21 loops I ran more than 4 of them alone. So it was just really fun to kind of have that experience there, even if it's a chain link fence and you never see the lake on it.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool though. So back to the Bigfoot 200. So Candace actually was on the podcast, I don't know, a month or two ago. So we talked a little bit about the race, and it's definitely an item on my bucket list because I mean the photos and stuff, like you said, I mean it's so remote and just unbelievable. So it's looks like an incredible race. So in terms of so you won it, so that's a whole different level of success. So what were the keys to that? I mean, obviously you were very familiar with the course because you helped set it up, but what were the keys to your success? And also, how did you handle the sleep depth and like, what was your strategy around sleep and to be able to handle that kind of distance?
Yeah, I really think after having done it, like I identified 3 pillars that if you want to do well at a 200, whatever well is for you, to really stand on. And the first one is your nutrition, obviously, which is pretty important no matter what the length. But you do kind of have to change your nutrition plan up for this and become accustomed. Same thing with GODZone. You're not running a 50 miler. You're not just taking in gels and energy bars. You have to be comfortable eating real foods and like training your GI to digest those. And so that was like one thing. All of my big training runs, I'd get everything under the sun. Sometimes, I'd like pick up a bag of McDonald's and eat a bunch of, like greasy breakfast sandwiches on a run. Another time I'd, try and do other, just like very atypical foods just to be able to train my body to be able to like take whatever it needs to, so that during the race, like, I mean, if you just have to be able to keep eating, otherwise you won't be able to do as well as you like with it. So training your GI, and then the other one is the other pillar is taking care of your feet. And I really think, I mean, this is purely on luck for myself, but I've never had feet issues, whether it was, from the days of tromping around the swamps of Georgia, in army boots when I went to Ranger school or something. But I've had very strong feet that don't blister. They don't really, get any sore spots. So that was one thing that I just never really had to consciously take care of my feet. Like my feet just worked really well. If you're not quite as lucky, like, you just need to identify what you need to do for taking care of feet. And I mean, I know a lot of people who I never get blisters in a 50 or 100 mile run, but 200 miles, it's totally different. So just figuring out what works for your feet, doing a lot more sock changes than you normally would, like just to make sure that your feet are staying dry, type of thing. But nutrition, being able to still stand on your feet, and then the sleep deprivation, like that's the other big thing of a 200 miler beyond a 100 miler, is figuring out your sleep schedule. And I did a couple of strategies specifically for Bigfoot. The 2 weeks before the race, I purposely got as much sleep as I physically could. I'd go to bed at 9 or 10 at night and not set an alarm for getting up the next morning. And thankfully, I was kind of working for myself as a race director for Evergreen Trail Runs, so I was able to set my own schedule and start work at 9 or 10 a.m. if that's when I woke up. But getting as much sleep as you can in the 2 weeks leading up to it as well. I know this is a big point of contention, but I adhered to the no caffeine for a month prior to the race, and then would, just to kind of clear the caffeine out of my body. And then during the race, I would strategically use caffeine, like only where, I really needed it. It was, from experience, I know that I don't get sleepy on like a downhill. And, so Bigfoot 200, that you have a 2,000 foot descent coming up. I would not, even if I was like a little bit sleepy climbing up near the top of it, be like, all right, well, in 10 minutes, I have like a big descent. So that'll keep me awake. So, and I knew that climbing uphill, if I had a 3,000 foot ascent, I would, no matter what, be getting sleepy on it. So right before I started the ascent, I'd pop like a caffeine pill or two. And each one of those are 200 milligrams. So those are pretty effective. And, but it's also not overdoing that. Like I didn't want to just be popping caffeine left and right. So it was keeping it for when I knew I would very, very specifically need that caffeine. And I mean, that worked really well. That I ended up only needing to sleep for about 65 minutes during the entire 62 hours.
Wow.
And, it worked a lot better than I thought it would. Like I did one 15-minute nap the first overnight around like 1 or 2 a.m. And then a second, and then the middle of the second day, kind of the afternoon, I did another 25-minute nap. And then I think after that, it was just a series of 5-minute cat naps out on the, dirt naps out on the trail. So there was only 2 times where I actually kind of crawled into my, my support crew's van. My parents were driving my van around and we had a bed in the back. So, slept in there twice and, maybe 3 times. A third time was there. And then after that, it was 4 5-minute dirt naps out on the trail. Just when I absolutely couldn't go anymore. And the caffeine wasn't quite working. I'd just lay down for 5 minutes and it'd be enough to just reset my internal clock and then be able to get up and go.
What did your training look like? I mean, what kind of mileage were you putting in on a weekly basis to get ready for these races?
I'm probably very atypical when it comes to, maybe probably definitely more than your triathlon crew. But I really, when I was in college, I followed a very distinct plan for training for marathons and, did pretty, for myself, did pretty well with those, and was happy. But like I don't really follow like a training plan anymore now. Like I'm much more about everything is a training for the next thing. So in the months leading up to Bigfoot 200 and the Rash, which is my other big project for the summer, like I very much just focused on big adventures in and of itself, of like things that I wanted to do in the state of Washington that I knew would push my limits. And so kind of like for each month, starting in March, I would plan like, all right, what's going to be my big push for this month? And then, I'd kind of like take a couple weeks off in between each of those big pushes, and then kind of like ramp up to it, do the big push, and then a couple weeks off, another big one. So that was, I guess in essence, it was kind of a distinct training plan, but it wasn't a, like I have to hit 70 miles a week, this week. So for me anyway, like it just keeps the joy in trail running much more alive by just making it other things that I want to do instead of like, I have to run X amount.
Right. No, that makes sense. And so you also did the Tahoe 200 that year. I mean, how would you kind of compare and contrast that experience and course?
Yeah. I ended up doing Tahoe 200 as a full-time suite with a buddy of mine, Will Fortin. We kind of got the idea at Bigfoot 200 afterwards to like sweep the entire thing and try and drink 50 beers during it. So,
oh, wow.
I wasn't racing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a pretty fun experience to have just kind of a different goal than just run it to win it or something. But yeah, it was a really cool experience. So I didn't race that one, but just an absolute incredible course to encircle Lake Tahoe. You start on one side of it, 100 miles in, you're on the other side of the lake, and you look across to where you started. You're like, oh my God, like I've came so far, but I have to still go around this lake, and finish the second half of this thing. It's just so intimidating to be able to see the lake from, most of the entire course on it. So, but yeah, it's Bigfoot and Tahoe, like they have the same feel that Candace, kind of builds there around it, of like, they are family style affairs. Like it's, when you go there, you're not just a runner. It's such a cool experience to, run those races and just be a part of that community. But yeah, Bigfoot being in my home, or, my now home of Washington State, much more partial to that one. But Tahoe's just such a cool course, not quite as hilly, not as much elevation gain, and trails are a little bit less technical at Tahoe than Bigfoot. So if, you're looking for which one's easier for your first 200, I'd definitely probably say Tahoe is easier, but Bigfoot probably is more rewarding.
Right. And were you successful in the 50 beer challenge?
Yeah. I had the chugged the last one right at the finish line. Like 99 and a half hours with the 100-hour cutoff. So yeah, of sweeping the entire course, and drinking 50 beers, we thought the 50 beers would be the challenge, but it actually ended up that that was the easy part. Like we probably could have done 75 beers a piece pretty easily, but it was the sweeping and adhering to a different schedule than you really kind of want to. That ended up being the most difficult part of it, of just like being forced that like, all right, now we're on the last runner. We have to like sit here and wait, even though it's the middle of the night and we're cold. We have to, hunker down here for 30 minutes to, still keep sweeping. So,
interesting.
It was fine for a little while, but for 4.5 or 4 days of that, it got to be pretty difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I guess one final question, what else is on tap for 2017 and beyond? What else do you have planned in terms of races and adventures?
Yeah, I'm actually not even signed up for a single race yet this for 2017. But I'm not putting Primal Quest out of the question. If I can kind of find the right team who wants to do Primal Quest, or I might give that one a go since it's kind of right in my backyard up in British Columbia. It's really cool event, and excited to see Primal Quest take off with. The year I did it, they only had 11 racing teams, and this year they got quite a few more. So I'm excited that, it's kind of growing. But really what I'm going to be concentrating on this summer back in Washington is integrating trail running and rock climbing. There are just so many climbs that are deep in the backcountry that are, pretty moderate climbs, but, they're just very, very deep in there. So, it's usually like 3-4 day backpack to go climb them. But, doing them in more of a trail running ultra mentality of just taking as light of a rack as possible and running in there, doing the climb, and then running out. So that's kind of got a tick list going a little bit, and just going to try and find some partners who are down for that type of stuff too. And just seeing more of that and kind of less racing this summer.
Yeah. Well, Richard, thank you so much for your time, and thanks for coordinating the major time zone difference between you and I. We were able to do it, pretty easily. So appreciate it. And, thanks again for sharing these experiences and some of the tips and stuff around the races that you've done.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Thanks, Adam. Yeah. Appreciate being on.
Thanks for listening to the Intelligent Racer podcast. For more information on this and other episodes, please visit www.intelligentracer.com. Also, be sure to check us out on social media, and please review us on your podcast directory. Join us next time for another edition of the Intelligent Racer.